Alright guys, this is Skye. She is a teenage standardbred mare who was used for standardbred harness racing. And then she was a broodmare for a few years. And now she is here to learn how to be ridden. A lot like the Loki videos, Skye has some former cart horse training, though for racing it is a little bit different. But you'll notice some similarities. And she's been here for about the last month and she's doing really well. I made a video today to help her owner understand some of the stuff we've been working on as she's learning about sensitizing and desensitizing to some of our equipment. And I thought it was a really informative video, so I'm going to go ahead and share it here for anyone who's interested in the work that I'm doing with Skye. Alright, I've got Skye with me today. I left her by the gate. She just had her breakfast. She's feeling a little relaxed. And what we're working on right now is kind of two things, but both of them come back to the idea of balance. And the balance is between pressure and release. It's between relaxation and energy, so response time. So I want a horse that is both responsive, so when I point and kiss, they're ready to get going. So that comes back to the very basis of our groundwork. But I also want a horse that when I back up and invite them in, they immediately come to a stop and lick and chew and relax. Yeah, good girl. So I want her to have that good balance between reaction and responsiveness with relaxation. Now, she's been doing really good with this stuff. That's the basis of the groundwork we've done all throughout the first few weeks together. The issue comes in when we start to apply physical pressure. So when I get close to her, I have a lunge whip in my hand. When I get close to her with the lunge whip, she gets a little bit nervous. But mostly, once she starts getting touched by the lunge whip, she gets pretty nervous. So I'm going to go talk to her. Right, Skye? We've been working on this all of last week. You good girl. That's what I like. Good girl. You want to see it? Yeah, it's not going to hurt you. And she's even pretty good about me petting her with it, but if you look in her eye, you can see how she's nervous about that. Easy girly. And I don't know if you could see it, but she kind of chose to step towards me where I'm rubbing her. So what I'm just going to do, because right now we're trying to balance relaxation, so I want her to relax. So I am going to wait and just kind of rub her. If she walks away, I'm going to go with her. Good girl. If she runs away, then we're going to have to send her off. But I'm not doing anything besides just rubbing her with the stick. And ideally what's going to happen is in a minute here, she's going to realize that she doesn't need to be tense just because the stick is touching her. And that's kind of where we're at. She will stand still and allow this, but there's a lot of tension in her body with it. And because of that, when we move up to a bigger movement, the walk, which is bigger than the stop, that tension releases itself and she just kind of has a meltdown. So this isn't the problem. The problem comes in when we start moving with the rope. So we're going to do our relaxation and wait. She's not flapping her lips, so that's good. She's not even flicking her tail much. She was earlier. So this is good. There's lots of blinking. So yeah, I'm just going to pet her with it. And I'm going to keep petting her with it and keep petting her with it all the way until she licks and chews. Sometimes, there it is. Good girl. So now I'm going to pause and let her think about it. So sometimes we wait till the horse blinks and then we stop. But with Skye, with this one, because it's physical pressure, it's totally different theory. I'm actually going to keep petting her until I get the lick and chew. So that's part of this idea of stay. See right there, she started licking and chewing. My whip stopped moving. Yeah, now we've got some more curiosity. Very good. I'm going to pull it away. Watch how she reacts when she hears it move. See that bigger eye? So now I'm going to wait for another lick and chew. So we're figuring out relaxation can happen when the whip is moving and when it's touching you. Good girl. And she's doing a lot better today than she has been. I mean, we've been working on this for a few days now, so it's good that it's progressing. Good girl. Good girl. We have a lot of thoughts about that. Yeah. Good girl. Just gonna wait her out. All right. So I'm gonna flick the rope back over her, the lunge whip, and start rubbing her on the back again. Ideally, I would want her to keep her head nice and level and not to change, but wherever her head and neck are, I'm willing to bet that when I put the rope over her back, it's gonna raise up. It might be a few inches, it might be several inches. Just a few inches, so that's much better, but she did get some more tension in her eyes. So see how her eyes open nice and wide? So that's a lot better. Good girl. It was just about 1 or 2 inches she raised up, but she's gonna recover from it a lot faster. She's already blinking. That's so good. So we're making progress. This is good. And this does not look like it's that much. We could easily move past this. The problem is with Skye, she's actually, because she's taught to pull a cart. If you think about it, when they pull a cart, they're taught to basically ride into the pressure. They have the cart strapped to their shoulders, and when they move forward, it follows them and they're pulling it. So they're putting effort into pulling it. They're moving into pressure. Because that's what this horse was taught, when I want to use this as an aid to move her hip or her shoulder over, or if I want to get on her and use my legs, rather than moving away from that pressure and using it to shape the body, she tries to turn into it very sharply and barge through it. So it is the exact opposite of what we want, to a very strong degree, to the point that it's something that we need to correct before we can move on with her training. Good girl, Skye. Good girl. All right, so we've got some relaxation. Now, we can't just have a horse that's relaxed all the time. That's ideal, but sometimes I want her to move off. So I'm actually gonna step back now and start balancing the responsiveness. We're going back to responsiveness. So I'm gonna point. Very good response. I'm gonna ask her to trot. There, so that was a little sluggish of a response. She's a little sore today. Might just be stretching out. I'm gonna point again. Oh, that was much better. Good girl. I love that. And did you see how she kind of elevated a little bit in her front end when we did that response too? So I'm staying a little bit back and I'm not really pushing her. I'm gonna back up, see if we can get that relaxation. That's a great reaction, very good. And then we'll see how long it takes her to relax. Very good girl, Skye. Not bad, not bad at all. So that's a really great example of the start of this. I'm gonna grab my rope now and go catch her. And we're gonna do it all over again on the lead rope, my 15-foot lead rope, because there's also an element of this where sometimes she feels trapped and that makes her more nervous. So here I have her on the rope. Good girl, Skye. I'm gonna talk about it. Good girl, Skye. And so I'm gonna put this over here, wait for some relaxation. Good. So how do you get a horse to be relaxed and responsive at the same time? You jump back and forth between those two things so often that when they are relaxed, they're still thinking about being responsive, and when they're responsive, they're still thinking about being relaxed. If we stay relaxed and never practice responsive, then you'll never have responsive when you need it. If we only practice responsive but never allow the horse to relax, then it's possible that we end up with a horse that's very nervous with no relaxation, even if they're very obedient. So what we've got here is a horse that was taught to be very obedient. That was so good, Skye. I'm very happy with how she responded to that. There's not much concern in her eye. She's pretty okay with it. And it'll be a little bit of a different story once we start moving. So she was taught to be very responsive, but she wasn't taught a lot about how to relax. So we're going to spend more time with this horse on relaxing. Whereas a horse like Bonnie was bred to be very relaxed, so we have to spend a lot of time on responsive. Good girl, Skye. So this is all really good, and this is about what we do for our warm-ups every day. Just kind of do a little bit of jumping back and forth, relax and response. So I'm gonna point. Good. I'm gonna send her around me. See how the tail's starting to flick? So she didn't have the tail flicking when she was on no rein. So the tail flicking is another sign of minor stress. It's just one of those things. And so it's starting to flick now because she's confined on the rope. And that makes her a little bit nervous. Good. So I'm gonna pull her in. Good. We're gonna watch and see what she thinks and see how the tail flicking is dying down. Good girl. There you go. Good girl. She's thinking. A lot of big thoughts. Good girl. There's a little lick and chew. She's got a lot more in there though. So see how she's kind of fidgety right now? It means she's not done with her lick and chew. She's fidgety with her head, she's fidgety with her tail. So I'm gonna keep waiting this one out. There's some more fidgeting. Good girl. Yeah? Yep, I see. Okay. There's our lick and chew. Good girl. Still fidgeting, so she's still not done. There's some more. That's better. Good girl. So I'm gonna flick the rope over her back and we'll see how she... Oh, nope. She's like, no, 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 you're not. I'm still thinking. Yeah, you got some more in there? Good girl. Yep. All right, I'm gonna do the same thing, flick the rope over her back. So this is like her default headset. I would like this to be something that is so boring to her that if she's hanging her head low like it was a second ago, when I flick the rope over her back, she doesn't even feel the need to get up. Now, with the lunge whip, it can be a neutral aid, meaning it doesn't mean anything, but it can also be an aid that does mean something. Just like the horse has to balance between relaxation and responsive, they have to understand that there's tools that have the same thing. There can be tools that are just passive, and then there's tools that mean something, and they can be the same tool, and it can be all about how you use it. If you think about it, when you're riding a horse, your legs are a passive and an active tool depending on the time. If you're happily going along on the trail ride, well, guess what? Your legs don't just disappear. They still wrap around the horse's body. They still move. So that's going to be a passive aid that this horse has to recognize is not scary and is something that she can just, have and interact with and not be worried about. But let's say that you want to ask her, there's a tree coming up on your left and she's going to run you into it. So you want to use your left leg, because the tree's on your left, to tell the horse to move to her right, to get you out of the way of that tree. All of a sudden, your passive legs go to active aids, and you're just wiggling that leg, and she has to know that that now means to move, and it's not that it didn't mean anything before, it's that there's a difference depending on your intention and how it's being used. So the way that we practice that before we get on is with the whip. Right now, the whip is a passive aid, and she's gotten a lot more concerned. There's a lot more tail flicking, a lot more head bobbing, because she's confined on the rope, and that's something that helps build some anxiety for her. But in a minute, I'm going to start using the whip as an active aid, where I use it to ask her to move over. So this actually is something you can do, but you have to be careful with it. There's a couple things this horse does that I do not want to allow. Yeah, good girl. Good girl. Can we talk about it? Yeah. Let me help you with this. This keeps booping you in the face. We're gonna tuck it in. Good girl. So I'm gonna go ahead, now that we've got a little bit of relaxation, I'm gonna ask for the whip as an active aid, get a response from her, and then go right back to using the whip as a passive aid. So we're gonna go to responsive for a second, because this horse cannot handle a long amount of responsive without getting really worried. So we're gonna do responsive for a second, and then we're gonna go right back to relaxed. You ready? So responsive, touch her butt, tap. See how she's not responding? Now see how she's getting closer to me in my space? That's not what I want. There it is, there it is. Good. So the very first thing she did was ignore it. The second thing she did was move towards me and try and cut me off and move into the pressure. So I got a little bit more aggressive with my tapping, and you saw that made her really nervous. Her tail even got tangled up in the whip for a second. And then finally she stepped under with her hind legs and moved away from the pressure, and that's when I stopped with the whip. And now I'm using it as a passive aid. I'm even going to rub her butt with it because I don't want it to always mean something. Good. See how that's making her a little nervous too. So this is my passive aid. So we went to responsive, which was not like a very good responsive. We're working on that. So see how she's shifting, she's moving her shoulder closer to me. I'm not moving my feet right now. So as the horse gets closer and fills up the field of view in the camera, that's how you can tell she's moving closer to me. Good girl. I know, it's scary. I'm gonna come up here. You can see how she's a little nervous about this. Because in her previous life, this meant something totally different, and no one uses a whip on a horse unless they want them to run. There's a good lick and chew. So I'm gonna stop right there for a second and see, and we won't be able to get perfectly responsive. I will not be able to get this horse to just in a really nice way, in a great frame, just move off the very first time I touch her. And just like I should not expect perfectly responsive, I shouldn't expect perfectly relaxed either. So perfectly relaxed is not gonna happen right now because Skye is nervous, but we can get a little bit of relaxed. So in that way, we practice a little bit of both sides. And the ability to move between both sides helps to build security at, maybe she's a level 2 in relaxation, we want her to be a level 5. Well, she's kind of insecure in being a level 2. The more we can have her go back and forth and land there, the more secure she's gonna be holding that spot, and she'll be more willing to move on to a level 3. And then we'll get to that level 5. So this is much better. All right, so we've got a relaxed horse. Now it's time to be responsive again. So I'm gonna take the whip and tap, tap, tap. Ignoring, stepping towards me. There's the step under, so I stop. That was much better. You good girl. There's a lick and chew. So I'm gonna let her think about it. And now I'm gonna go right back and we're gonna have a passive aid. And the big thing that's different is I'm not doing anything with my body, and notice how the whip is rubbing, not tapping. But see how she's a little bit nervous about this. She raised her head up, but her tail's not flicking, so that's a good sign. And remember, this is what we spent all of last week working on, so it's good that we're seeing this much. Usually when the horses start out the first thing in the morning, they kind of default to like their baseline, which we saw, but we're seeing a lot of progress in a very short amount of repetitions because we've been working on this. Good girl. All right, we got some relaxation. I'm gonna let her think. There's some gnats out today, honey. I know, they're annoying. Good girl. Some horses are having fun in the background. Good girl, Skye. There's a nice little lick and chew. Really little one. I think she has more. Sometimes I can feel how tight she is in her mouth. Sometimes their mouth is just suctioned shut and you can't really fit a finger in there. But sometimes it's a little bit loose, so you just kind of wiggle your finger in and it initiates that lick and chew. Don't do it every time, but if you want to know if they've got more in there or where they are in terms of tension, you can test it out. All right, so we got relaxed, back to responsive. Tap, tap, tap. Ignoring. There, that was a good little step. Look at you. So that was very quick. She took about 3 steps. It took about 5 or 6 taps for her to get that one. So that was lovely. Now we have to make sure that we're not just asking for the hip to disengage all the time. So that's a Western thing, is to disengage the hip. Another thing that we actually want to do is to be able to disengage the shoulder. So we got relaxed. I'm going to tap, tap, tap. That's it. Good girl. She remembers that one. So we actually want to be able to move both the shoulder and the hip on these horses. So with Skye, the difference between the two is that when I ask her to move the hip, I stand looking at her shoulder and I hold my rope up almost like I'm asking her to bend her head towards me. So I tap, tap, tap the hip. She's moving towards me. There's the movement. And so what we're looking for is that crossing over of this leg. So if I'm on her left side, I want that left leg to step up under her belly button, kind of like it's trying to put her left hoof print where her right hoof is now. When I do the same thing on the shoulder, I move to the front of the horse, kind of like a 3/4 view. So I'm not directly in front of her. I'm off to her left. I have just enough rope that I can block her head, because sometimes she'll swing her head around right in front of me like this. So I have enough rope that I can block her head if I need to. And I just tap here on the shoulder. Same thing. Good. And I tap, tap, tap until she moves it away. Very good, Skye. Yes, look at that. And any bit of moving away from me is good. You're doing so good today. You got that, didn't you? You remember. This is awesome. So she has had a lot of trouble with this pretty much all of last week. She was struggling with this. And so we'd come out and we would do the same thing Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And we started at about the same spot and just practiced, and we'd end at about the same spot. And it almost looked like Monday, Wednesday, Friday were an exact repeat of one another. But sometimes that's what a horse needs, and it feels like you're not making progress, but really you are, because practice is progress. And you can't just practice something one time and expect it to stick. So if we came back out again and we needed to practice the same thing again, well, that's what Skye's telling me, is she needs more practice. Today, she's telling me, hey, I remember some of this stuff. So we can be a little bit more expectant of what she does with her practice. So I can expect a better, yes, that was exceptional. I can expect a better quality step over. So with the feet, you always want them stepping towards the belly button. With the hind end, this inside foot steps towards the belly button. There it is. Good. And so it kind of comes forward and under. Whereas in the front end, I want this front foot to actually come back and under. So when I cut her off right here and step over. Yes. Yes, just like that. I don't know if that caught on camera, but that was super good. And we've got a good lick and chew. You're so good, Skye. So this is what I'm doing. And now I've done all of this on the left side of the horse. I'm going to switch and do everything all over again on the right side of this horse. I'm gonna let her relax for a second. And yeah, that's how we go back and forth between responsiveness and relaxed. I haven't done any passive cues for a little bit, so I'm gonna do some passive cues now. Good girl. And finally, there is one more thing we can practice on this side, and this is definitely something we have trouble with. And it's not something that I'd want you to practice, unless you felt confident. But it is passive cues while the horse is moving. See how she kind of just starts to scoot a little bit towards me? So she's doing really, really good today. She's not scooting towards me. Right here she is a little bit. I think it's because the mounting block's in the way. So I'm gonna come over here. And obviously she needs to stay on the line for this. So it's just enough that I can rub her. And see how I rub back here? Her butt kind of comes towards me, and she could almost hit me with her tail. So yeah, passive cues when she's moving have been something that the last few days she's had a lot of trouble with. This is probably the thing that would set her off and to worry the most. But that's really good. Very good, Skye. So I'm just gonna keep rubbing her because this is totally normal. See how she cuts towards me? Now the problem is, the reason I wouldn't want you doing this is because sometimes she cuts towards you so bad she's like running you over and you're having to back your feet up in order to get away from her so she doesn't step on you. I don't want to put you in that position because that would definitely teach her the wrong thing in a very big way. So maybe don't work on this one unless you have someone to help spot you. And if she does get a little close, see how she kind of got nervous and the tail started flicking? So I started moving my arm out towards her, almost like this is turning into an active cue. And which it will, because let's say she starts bringing her butt towards me. Well, I want to be able to tap, tap, tap and move it away just like that. Good girl. And maybe she brings her shoulder towards me. I'm gonna tap, tap and move it away. Her butt's a little close. Oops, sorry. See how her tail's hitting the rope? Yeah, so she got it really tangled up the other day. There's a good step. Good girl. Good girl. I can even use the butt of my rope and just tap, tap, tap. Yes, and I don't even have to tap. Did you see how like I just had the idea of tapping and she moves that? Good step. That was a really good one. That was excellent. I'm going to let her rest there. And so that's how we're going to put all the pieces together. She should be able to move her shoulders and hips independently at the walk. And she should move them away from the pressure. And then when we start riding her, the position of your leg is going to tell her what to move at a given time. That's how people who ride reining horses get the horses to spin on their hind end, where they plant their back feet and run their front feet around and spin like a top. Or we can do a turn on the forehand to help direct the hips like we're getting ready for a canter transition. But importantly is that when I asked her while she was moving to step that hip over, and she did, good girl, she also kept moving her front end and got this cute little bend in her body. Yes, that's it. Good girl. Just for like a half a second. Yeah, that was awesome. So I love that. I really love that for this horse. You are doing so good today, Skye. All right, so I'm gonna work on the right side, the right side of the horse now. I'm gonna cut the video off because you get an idea for what I'm doing. Yeah, yes, we're gonna do it. You can see, there's no lip flapping, which is her number one sign of anxiety. The tail flicking is like the minor anxiety. So we've avoided lip flapping all day today for this girl, which is a really great thing. Yeah. So we're seeing a lot more relaxation. And she's being much more responsive. And so this is what we've been working on, and all different horses take different amounts of time to learn this. This is something that all horses need to learn. Horses that have been trained a different way. I'm finding that the cart horses for sure have been essentially trained the opposite of this because they're not trained to have a rider on them. So Loki was the same way. Skye's having this issue now. So I'm finding that these horses are having a really hard time with this yielding to pressure and isolating the front end from the hind end and getting the stiffness out of their body. But they're so happy when they find it. They're like, oh wait, that helps me relax. I kind of like that. Yeah. So Skye's doing really well. I think that, this is something that with Loki, his owner is still working on that with him, and it's going to be something that we incorporate a lot of riding practice and drills in, and it's something you check on every time you ride. Probably for the first year you own this horse, you want to have that at the top priority of your mind, is balance relaxation with responsiveness, balance passive aids with active aids. She needs to know that every aid can be both passive and active. She needs to know that everything you ask her to do should have a relaxation component and a responsive component. And she's definitely starting to learn that. All right, Skye. Good girl.